Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Before we begin, if you're planning on falling asleep to this video, please introduce yourself in the comments or simply say hello. Every comment really helps. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to help us grow. Story 1. The Vanishing Child. Part 1. The Arrival. Nestled in a quiet valley, the town of Willow Creek had always been a place of peace and safety. Everyone knew everyone, and the townspeople were more like an extended family than mere neighbors. Life in Willow Creek was predictable, but all that changed on a warm summer afternoon when young Lily Thompson went missing. Lily was an energetic 7-year-old with curly blonde hair and a smile that could light up any room. She was last seen playing in her backyard, a familiar scene to the townsfolk. Her parents, Jane and Tom Thompson, were well-respected members of the community. Jane was a teacher at the local elementary school, and Tom worked at the town's only hardware store. Their life, though simple, was filled with love and laughter until that fateful day. The search for Lily began immediately. Jane and Tom were frantic, calling out to friends and family, their voices cracking with desperation. The news of Lily's disappearance spread like wildfire, and soon the entire town was involved. Volunteers formed search parties, scouring the woods, fields, and every nook and cranny of Willow Creek. Flyers with Lily's picture were plastered on every lamppost and shop window, and the local radio station broadcasted pleas for information around the clock. Jane and Tom led the search efforts, their faces etched with grief and determination. Every evening, Jane stood at the town square, her voice trembling as she spoke to the gathered crowd. "Please, if anyone knows anything, no matter how small, come forward. Our little girl needs us." Tom, usually a pillar of strength, was a shadow of his former self, his eyes hollow and red-rimmed from sleepless nights. The town's solidarity was heartwarming. Candlelight vigils were held nightly, with townsfolk holding hands, praying, and singing hymns. The community's outpouring of love was overwhelming, but as days turned into weeks, hope began to wane. Lily's absence left a gaping hole in Willow Creek, and the once lively town now moved under a cloud of sorrow. Among the volunteers was Detective Sam Williams, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp mind and keen instincts. Sam had grown up in Willow Creek and returned after years of working in the city. He was determined to find Lily and bring her home. As he delved into the case, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The more he interacted with Jane and Tom, the more he noticed subtle inconsistencies in their stories. Sam's first visit to the Thompson house was filled with emotion. Jane clutched a tissue, tears streaming down her face, while Tom sat quietly, his hands trembling. They recounted the day Lily went missing, but their accounts didn't quite match. Jane said Lily had been playing with her favorite doll in the backyard, but Tom mentioned she was riding her bike down the street. Sam's instincts told him to dig deeper. Over the next few days, Sam immersed himself in the investigation. He interviewed neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly lady next door, mentioned hearing strange noises coming from the Thompson house the night before Lily vanished. It sounded like chanting, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It gave me the chills. As Sam pieced together the puzzle, he discovered that the Thompsons had a history that few in Willow Creek knew about. Years ago, before they moved to the town, they had lived in a secluded community known for its peculiar practices. The deeper Sam dug, the more he realized that Jane and Tom's past was shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, strange occurrences began to plague Willow Creek. Objects moved on their own, eerie whispers filled the night, and several townsfolk reported seeing a ghostly figure that resembled Lily. The sightings were always fleeting. A flash of blonde curls disappearing around a corner, or a soft giggle echoing in the wind. Fear and unease settled over the town, adding to the already palpable tension. One evening, Sam was reviewing his notes in the quiet of his office when he felt a chill run down his spine. He looked up to see a faint outline of a child standing by the window. Heart pounding, he approached cautiously, but the figure vanished before he could reach it. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was trying to communicate, reaching out from somewhere beyond. Driven by a newfound urgency, Sam redoubled his efforts. He spent hours at the library, poring over old newspapers and records, trying to find any connection between the Thompsons and their former community. His research led him to a series of disturbing articles about a cult that believed in human sacrifices to achieve immortality. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they painted was more horrifying than he could have imagined. Sam knew he had to confront Jane and Tom with what he had discovered, but he needed more concrete evidence. He decided to stake out their house, hoping to catch them in a moment of unguarded truth. For several nights, he watched from a distance, his eyes never leaving the dimly lit windows. On the third night, he saw them. Jane and Tom were in the backyard, and through his binoculars, Sam could see them standing around a small, makeshift altar. His heart raced as he saw them holding hands, their lips moving in silent prayer. The sight confirmed his worst fears. But he knew he needed to be careful. If they realized he was onto them, Lily's fate, and possibly his own, would be sealed. Sam's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and plans as he prepared to confront the Thompsons. He knew he was getting closer to the truth, but little did he know, the darkness that enveloped Willow Creek was far deeper and more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. Part 2. The Investigation. Detective Sam Williams couldn't shake the image of Jane and Tom Thompson in their backyard, standing around the makeshift altar. He knew he had to act quickly, but without solid evidence, he couldn't confront them directly. The stakes were too high, and he needed to be sure. The next morning, Sam visited the town library again. He combed through more records, searching for any mention of the cult he suspected the Thompsons were involved with. His persistence paid off when he stumbled upon an old journal belonging to a former resident of the secluded community. The entries detailed the cult's rituals and beliefs. Confirming Sam's worst fears, the cult believed that sacrificing a child could grant immortality. Armed with this new information, Sam returned to the Thompson house. But this time he wasn't alone. He had enlisted the help of his trusted friend and fellow officer Rachel. Together, they planned to gather evidence from the Thompsons' home. They knew it was a risky move, but it was their best chance to uncover the truth and save Lily. Under the cover of darkness, Sam and Rachel approached the house. They picked the lock on the back door and quietly slipped inside. The house was eerily silent, the only sound their own breathing. They moved cautiously through the rooms, careful not to disturb anything. In the living room, they found a large old book on a lectern. The book was filled with strange symbols and writings, confirming their suspicions about the Thompsons' involvement in dark rituals. As they moved deeper into the house, they found a door leading to the basement. It was locked, but Sam managed to pick it. The basement was dimly lit and smelled of damp earth. In the center of the room was the makeshift altar Sam had seen from outside, adorned with candles and strange artifacts. On the walls were symbols drawn in red, and in one corner, they found a small, blood-stained dress. It was unmistakably Lily's. Rachel took photos of everything while Sam searched for more clues. In a drawer near the altar, he found a collection of old letters. The letters detailed the cult's history and included correspondence between Jane, Tom, and other cult members. The most recent letter, dated just a week before Lily's disappearance, mentioned a ritual that would take place on the upcoming full moon, the very next night. With this damning evidence in hand, Sam and Rachel left the house as quietly as they had entered. They knew they had to act quickly. The next day, Sam presented the evidence to the police chief, who reluctantly agreed to issue a warrant for Jane and Tom's arrest. The plan was to apprehend them during the ritual, ensuring that Lily could be saved. As night fell, the air in Willow Creek was thick with tension. Sam and Rachel, along with a team of officers, positioned themselves around the Thompson house. They waited in silence, their nerves on edge. When the clock struck midnight, they moved in. The basement door was ajar, and as they descended the stairs, they could hear chanting. Jane and Tom were standing by the altar, their faces illuminated by candlelight. Lily was lying on the altar, unconscious but alive. The sight sent a surge of anger through Sam, but he remained focused. He signaled to the officers, and they moved in, guns drawn. "Drop everything and step away from the girl," Sam shouted. Jane and Tom turned, their faces a mixture of shock and defiance. For a moment it seemed they might resist, but the sight of the armed officers made them comply. Jane began to cry, her tears a stark contrast to the cold resolve on Tom's face. Lily was quickly taken to safety, and Jane and Tom were handcuffed and led away. As they were escorted out, Jane looked at Sam with a haunting expression. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not over. It's never over. Sam felt a chill run down his spine, but he pushed the thought aside. He had done his job. Lily was safe, and the Thompsons would face justice. But as he walked through the house one last time, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still very wrong. The next morning, the town of Willow Creek was abuzz with the news. People were relieved that Lily had been found and the culprits apprehended. But the strange occurrences around town didn't stop. Objects still moved on their own. Whispers filled the night, and the ghostly figure resembling Lily was seen more frequently. Sam decided to visit Lily in the hospital, hoping to find some answers. When he arrived, he found her sitting up in bed, looking out the window. She seemed different, older somehow, as if the ordeal had aged her beyond her years. "Hi, Lily," Sam said softly. "How are you feeling?" Lily turned to him, her eyes wide and filled with fear. "They're coming back," she whispered. "They told me they would come back." Sam's heart sank. "Who, Lily? Who's coming back?" "The people from the shadows," she replied, her voice barely audible. "They said I wasn't the only one. They said they need more." Sam felt a sense of dread wash over him. He knew that the fight wasn't over, and the darkness that had enveloped Willow Creek was far from vanquished. The cult's reach was longer and more insidious than he had imagined, and the battle to protect the town and its children was just beginning. As he left the hospital, Sam knew he had to uncover the full extent of the cult's influence. The safety of Willow Creek depended on it. The haunting of the town was not just a series of strange occurrences, but a sign of something far more sinister. He steeled himself for the coming days, knowing that the true horror was yet to be revealed. Part 3. The Confrontation. The revelation that the cult's influence extended far beyond Jane and Tom Thompson was a grim realization for Detective Sam Williams. The sense of dread that had settled over Willow Creek was palpable, and the strange occurrences continued unabated. Objects still moved on their own, eerie whispers echoed through the night, and the ghostly figure resembling Lily appeared more frequently. Sam knew that the fight was far from over.
Sam spent the next few days gathering every piece of information he could about the cult. He interviewed Lily multiple times, though her memories were fragmented and filled with fear. She spoke of shadowy figures and whispered promises of their return. Sam also reached out to experts on cults and the occult, hoping to find a way to protect the town from the looming threat.
One evening, as Sam was reviewing his notes in his dimly lit office, a knock on the door startled him. It was Rachel, looking more serious than usual. She held out a file. "I think you need to see this," she said, her voice tense. Sam opened the file to find detailed reports on several other missing children cases from nearby towns. Each case had similarities to Lily's disappearance, children vanishing without a trace, strange symbols found near their homes, and parents with ties to the same cult. "This cult is bigger than we thought," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been operating for years, and it looks like they're not just after immortality. They want something else." Sam's mind raced. The pattern was clear, but the endgame was still a mystery. "We need to find out what they're planning and how to stop them," he said, determination in his voice. "We need to dig deeper." Together, Sam and Rachel worked tirelessly, following leads and interviewing anyone who might have information. They learned about a hidden location in the woods outside Willow Creek, rumored to be a gathering place for the cult. Deciding it was their best lead, they planned a raid. On the night of the raid, the air was thick with tension. Sam, Rachel, and a team of officers made their way through the dense forest, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They reached a clearing where an old, dilapidated cabin stood. The sight of it sent a shiver down Sam's spine. As they approached the cabin, they heard chanting coming from inside. Sam signaled for the team to move in. They burst through the door, weapons drawn, and found themselves face to face with a group of robed figures standing around a large, intricately carved stone altar. The cult members turned to face the intruders, their eyes filled with both surprise and anger. "Stop right there," Sam shouted. "This ends now." The leader of the group, a tall figure with piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. "You don't understand," he said, his voice calm and cold. "We are preparing for the return. The sacrifices are necessary." Sam's grip tightened on his gun. "What return? What are you talking about?" The leader smiled, a chilling expression that sent a wave of fear through the room. The return of the Ancient Ones, they will bring about a new age, and we will be their chosen ones. Before Sam could respond, the lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the cabin. The air grew thick with a dark, oppressive energy. The chanting grew louder, and the cult members began to sway, their voices rising in a sinister harmony. Realizing they needed to act fast, Sam and the officers moved to subdue the cult members. A fierce struggle ensued, but eventually they managed to overpower them. As they were being handcuffed and led away, the leader continued to smile. "It's too late," he whispered. "They're already here." Despite the eerie proclamation, Sam and Rachel knew they had to keep pushing forward. They searched the cabin and found numerous documents and artifacts related to the cult's rituals. Among them was a large, ancient-looking book filled with strange symbols and diagrams. As Sam flipped through the book, his eyes widened. It detailed a final ritual, one that was meant to summon the Ancient Ones the cult leader had spoken of. The ritual required the sacrifice of 3 innocent souls and was to take place at a specific location, an abandoned church on the outskirts of Willow Creek. "We need to get there," now Sam said urgently. "If what this book says is true, we don't have much time." Rachel nodded, and the team quickly regrouped. They drove to the abandoned church, the tension in the car thick as they raced against time. When they arrived, the sight before them was both chilling and surreal. The church, once a place of worship, now stood in eerie silence, its walls covered in strange symbols. Inside, they found 3 children, including Lily, bound and unconscious on the altar. Around them were more robed figures, chanting and preparing for the final ritual. Sam and his team moved quickly, breaking through the cultists and freeing the children. But as they did, the air grew colder, and a low rumble shook the ground. The cult leader, who had somehow escaped custody, appeared at the entrance, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You cannot stop it," he said, his voice echoing with otherworldly power. "The Ancient Ones will rise." A fierce battle ensued, with Sam and Rachel fighting desperately to protect the children. The cult leader proved to be a formidable opponent, his strength and speed enhanced by dark forces. But Sam's determination and Rachel's quick thinking eventually overpowered him. They managed to restrain him, and the dark energy that filled the church began to dissipate. As the last of the cultists were taken into custody, the children were rushed to safety. Sam looked around the church, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The threat had been neutralized, but the experience had left a mark on him.
Back in Willow Creek, the town began to heal. The strange occurrences gradually stopped, and the sense of dread lifted. Lily and the other children recovered, though the memories of their ordeal would take time to fade.
Sam and Rachel continued their work, ensuring that the cult's influence was thoroughly eradicated. They knew that the battle against such darkness was never truly over, but they were prepared to face whatever came next. In the months that followed, Willow Creek slowly returned to normal. The town's resilience was a testament to its strength and unity. And though the scars of the past remained, the community emerged stronger, bound by their shared experience and the knowledge that they had faced down the darkness and prevailed. As for Sam, he never forgot the lessons he learned during those harrowing weeks. He remained vigilant, always watching for signs of the cult's return or any other threats that might loom on the horizon. For in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the trees and the shadows lengthened at dusk, he knew that the battle between light and dark was an eternal one, and he was ready to fight it no matter the cost. Story 2, The Oracle's Curse. Part 1, The Gift. Emma had always felt different. From a young age, she had vivid dreams that often came true, small things at first, like knowing what her friends would say before they said it, or predicting a rainy day when the sun shone brightly. But as she grew older, her visions evolved into something far more profound and unsettling. It was during a routine morning walk through the park when Emma first experienced the full extent of her gift, or curse, as she would come to call it. As she strolled past a group of children playing near the pond, a sudden vision overtook her. She saw the swing set collapsing, children screaming, and chaos ensuing. Startled, Emma stumbled backward, catching the attention of a nearby mother who rushed to help. "Are you all right?" the concerned mother asked, steadying Emma. Emma could barely speak, her mind reeling from the intensity of what she had just seen. The swing. "It's going to collapse," she managed to say, pointing towards the playground equipment. The mother frowned, glancing at the swing set skeptically. "It looks fine to me," she said, clearly unsure of what to make of Emma's warning. But Emma couldn't ignore the vision. She insisted that the children be moved away from the swing set, pleading with the mother to trust her. Reluctantly, the mother ushered the children to a safer area, just as Emma's vision had foretold. Moments later, with a loud creak and crash, the swing set collapsed exactly as Emma had seen it. From that day forward, Emma's life changed irrevocably. News of her premonition spread through the small town like wildfire. Some called her a hero, while others whispered about her supposed psychic abilities. Emma herself struggled to make sense of what was happening. How could she see these things before they happened? Was it a gift or a curse? Driven by a sense of duty and a desire to use her newfound ability for good, Emma began to pay closer attention to her visions. She started keeping a journal documenting each premonition and the events that followed. The more she recorded, the more she realized the pattern. Every time she intervened to prevent a disaster, something worse inevitably happened in its place. Her first major test came when she saw a vision of a car accident at a busy intersection downtown. Emma rushed to the scene, warning drivers to slow down and avoid the intersection. At first, her efforts seemed successful. The accident was averted, and no one was hurt. But the following day, news broke of a massive pile-up on the highway just outside of town. Multiple cars were involved, and several people were seriously injured. Emma felt a sinking feeling in her chest. Had her actions caused this? Was she somehow responsible for the tragedy? As time went on, Emma's visions became more frequent and more disturbing. She saw fires engulfing buildings, bridges collapsing, and storms wreaking havoc. Each time she tried to intervene, hoping to change the course of events. But no matter what she did, the outcomes grew increasingly dire.
Her relationships began to suffer as well. Friends and family grew distant, unable to understand or accept Emma's ability. They accused her of meddling, of causing more harm than good. Emma withdrew into herself, becoming isolated and paranoid. The weight of her visions and their consequences bore down on her, threatening to suffocate her spirit.
One evening, as Emma sat alone in her apartment, she received a vision unlike any she had experienced before. It was a scene of utter devastation. A city skyline engulfed in flames, people running in panic, sirens wailing in the distance. Emma knew immediately that this was no ordinary disaster. It was catastrophic on a scale she had never imagined. Determined to prevent this impending tragedy, Emma threw herself into action. She contacted local authorities, warning them of the danger she foresaw. She pleaded with them to evacuate the city, to take every precaution possible. But her warnings fell on deaf ears. No one believed her anymore. They had grown weary of her predictions and the chaos that followed. Undeterred, Emma took matters into her own hands. She researched the city's infrastructure, identified potential weak points, and tried to anticipate where disaster might strike. She worked tirelessly, fueled by desperation and a sense of responsibility. But with each attempt to alter the future, Emma realized the horrifying truth. Every action she took to prevent the disaster only seemed to hasten its arrival. The more she tried to change fate, the more tightly it seemed to grip her in its cruel embrace. In a moment of heartbreaking clarity, Emma understood the nature of her gift or curse. Her ability to see the future was not a tool for good, but a cruel twist of fate. She was destined to be the catalyst for every tragedy she sought to prevent, a harbinger of doom rather than a savior. As the catastrophic event loomed closer, Emma stood on the brink of despair. She had sacrificed everything, her relationships, her sanity, her sense of self, to try and save others. But in the end, she realized she had only fueled the very disaster she had fought so hard to prevent. Now, with time running out and the city on the brink of destruction, Emma faced a choice. She could continue to fight against the inevitable, risking more lives in the process, or she could accept her fate and embrace the truth of her curse.
The weight of the decision pressed heavily upon her shoulders. Emma closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, and whispered a silent prayer for forgiveness for herself and for the countless lives she had unwittingly sacrificed in her quest to defy destiny.
Part 2. Obsession and Isolation.
Emma stood in the aftermath of yet another disaster averted. The relief that should have accompanied her success was overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. She had managed to prevent a massive fire from engulfing a historic building, but now, as she looked around at the chaos of emergency responders and frightened bystanders, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had only delayed the inevitable.
In the weeks that followed, Emma's premonitions intensified. She saw visions of floods sweeping through neighborhoods, earthquakes shaking the ground, and disease outbreaks spreading unchecked. Each time, she threw herself into action, determined to alter the course of events, but no matter what she did, the outcomes were always the same, or worse. Her obsession with her visions grew, consuming her thoughts day and night. She spent hours poring over her journal, trying to decipher patterns or clues that might help her prevent the next disaster. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford, her dreams haunted by visions of destruction and despair. Her relationships suffered as a result. Friends and family grew weary of Emma's constant warnings and frantic attempts to intervene. They accused her of being paranoid, of seeing danger where there was none. Some even suggested she seek professional help, but Emma refused. She couldn't afford to waste time on therapy or medication when lives were at stake. As the months passed, Emma became increasingly isolated. She withdrew from social gatherings, unable to bear the pitying looks or skeptical glances of those around her. She shut herself off from the world, finding solace only in the solitude of her apartment and the familiar pages of her journal. One evening, as Emma sat alone at her kitchen table, a knock on the door startled her. She peered through the peephole and saw her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, standing on the other side. Reluctantly, Emma opened the door. "Emma, dear, are you all right, Mrs.?" Jenkins asked, her voice filled with concern. Emma forced a smile, though she knew it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Mrs. Jenkins. Just tired, Mrs." Jenkins frowned, her eyes scanning Emma's face as if searching for answers. "You haven't been yourself lately," she said gently. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Emma shook her head, her throat tightening with unshed tears. "I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing anyone can do." "Mrs." Jenkins sighed, her expression one of resignation. "You can't keep blaming yourself for everything, Emma. Sometimes, things happen that are beyond our control." But Emma couldn't accept that. She had seen the consequences of inaction too many times. She knew the weight of responsibility that came with her gift or curse, and she couldn't bear to stand by and do nothing while others suffered. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's desperation grew. She became consumed by the need to find a solution, a way to break the cycle of destruction that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She researched tirelessly, delving into ancient texts, modern science, and everything in between in search of answers. One night, in the dim glow of her laptop screen, Emma stumbled upon an old folktale about a woman cursed with the ability to see the future. According to the legend, the woman's visions were a punishment for meddling in the affairs of the gods. No matter how hard she tried to change fate, her actions only brought about more suffering and chaos. The parallels between the folktale and Emma's own life were eerie. She read on, desperate for any clue that might offer a way out of her torment. But the more she learned, the more she realized that there was no easy solution, no magic spell or ritual that could undo what had been done.
Emma's health began to deteriorate under the strain of her relentless pursuit. She lost weight, her once vibrant eyes dulled with exhaustion. She pushed herself to the brink of collapse, fueled by a sense of duty and a desperate need to prove that her visions were not in vain.
One evening, as she sat hunched over her journal, a new vision overtook her. A vision of a young boy trapped in a burning building. Emma's heart raced as she frantically tried to piece together the details. She knew she had to act quickly, but she also knew that her previous attempts to intervene had only made things worse. Torn between fear and determination, Emma raced to the scene of the fire. Smoke billowed from the upper floors of the building, flames licking at the windows. Emergency responders rushed past her, their faces grim with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Emma scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of the young boy from her vision. And then she saw him, a small figure silhouetted against the orange glow of the flames. Without hesitation, she pushed through the crowd, calling out to him. James. James, you have to get out of there. The boy turned, his eyes wide with fear. How do you know my name? He asked, his voice trembling. Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. There's no time to explain, she said urgently. You have to trust me. Come with me now. With a surge of adrenaline, Emma led James to safety, guiding him through the smoke-filled corridors and down the stairs to where emergency responders were waiting. She collapsed onto the pavement outside, gasping for breath and shaking with exhaustion. As she watched firefighters battle the blaze, a sense of despair washed over her. She had saved James, but at what cost? What new disaster would arise to take his place? The weight of her failures pressed down on her, threatening to crush her spirit once and for all. That night, as Emma lay awake in bed, her mind racing with thoughts of what had transpired, a new vision overtook her, a vision of the catastrophic event she had seen weeks before. The city skyline engulfed in flames, people running in panic, sirens wailing in the distance. Emma knew then that her quest to defy fate had only led her deeper into its clutches. She had become a prisoner of her own visions, trapped in a cycle of destruction and despair. And as the catastrophic event loomed closer, Emma faced a choice that would determine the fate of not just herself, but of everyone around her. Part 3: Acceptance and Revelation. The city lay shrouded in darkness as Emma stood on the rooftop of her apartment building, the cold wind whipping through her hair. She stared out at the skyline, her heart heavy with the weight of her final, horrifying vision. In her mind's eye, she saw the streets below filled with chaos, buildings crumbling, cars overturned, people running in panic. She could hear the distant wail of sirens, the crackle of flames devouring everything in their path. It was a scene of utter devastation, a nightmare made real. Emma knew that time was running out. She had to find a way to stop the catastrophe before it was too late. But with each passing moment, she felt the truth closing in around her like a suffocating blanket. Her attempts to prevent disasters had only fueled the cycle of destruction. Every warning she issued, every intervention she made, only seemed to hasten the arrival of catastrophe. She had become the catalyst for the tragedy she sought to avert, a grim irony that now threatened to consume her. Desperate for answers, Emma returned to her research. She scoured her journals, searching for any clue that might explain the nature of her curse. She revisited the folktale she had stumbled upon, the story of a woman cursed by the gods for meddling in fate. Could it be possible that she, too, had incurred the wrath of some unseen force? In her darkest moments, Emma considered the possibility that her visions were not a gift at all, but a punishment. Perhaps she had overstepped some cosmic boundary, dared to defy the natural order of things, and now she was paying the price. As dawn broke over the city, Emma resolved to confront the truth head-on. She called upon her last shreds of strength and clarity, knowing that what lay ahead would change everything. She visited the site of her latest vision, the heart of the city, where the impending catastrophe loomed like a shadow over the unsuspecting populace. Emergency responders buzzed around her, their voices a distant hum in her ears as she surveyed the scene before her. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos, a voice she recognized. It was James, the young boy she had saved from the burning building just days before. He stood beside her, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Emma, what's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. Emma turned to him, her heart aching with guilt. "I'm sorry, James," she whispered. "I tried to save you, but..." James shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "You did save me," he insisted. "You saved my life." But Emma knew the truth. She had saved James, yes, but at what cost? What new tragedy awaited them now, lurking just beyond the horizon? As the hours ticked by, Emma watched helplessly as events unfolded exactly as she had seen them in her vision. The city descended into chaos, fires raged unchecked, buildings crumbled, and lives hung in the balance. She tried to intervene, to warn those around her, but her words fell on deaf ears. No one believed her anymore. They had seen too many false alarms, too many warnings that had come to nothing. In the midst of the devastation, Emma found herself face to face with Mrs. Jenkins, her elderly neighbor who had once offered her kindness and support. Mrs. Jenkins looked at Emma with sadness in her eyes, her wrinkled hands clasped tightly together. You tried to warn us, she said softly. You tried to save us all. Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I thought I could change things, she admitted. I thought I could make a difference. Mrs. Jenkins reached out and took Emma's hand, squeezing it gently. Sometimes fate has other plans, she said quietly. We can't always control what happens, no matter how hard we try. Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek. She had spent so long fighting against fate, trying to rewrite the future. But now, standing amidst the wreckage of her own making, she realized the futility of her efforts. In a moment of heartbreaking clarity, Emma understood the true nature of her curse. Her ability to see the future was not a gift bestowed upon her for noble purposes, but a cruel twist of fate designed to ensure her role as the harbinger of fire. As the city burned around her, Emma made a decision that would seal her fate and the fate of those around her. She closed her eyes and accepted the truth, knowing that she could no longer fight against the inevitable. The story of Emma, the Oracle, would be remembered as a cautionary tale, a tale of hubris and humility, of courage and despair. She had dared to defy fate, only to discover that fate had always held the upper hand. And so as the flames licked at the sky and the sirens wailed in the distance, Emma stood alone on the rooftop, her heart heavy with sorrow and regret. She had tried to save lives, but in the end she had become the instrument of their destruction. The Oracle's curse had claimed its final victim, Emma herself. Story 3. The Mystery of Room 404. Part 1. Arrival. The wind whispered through the tall pines as Alex pulled up to the Weatherwood Inn, a remote hotel nestled deep in the mountains. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. The inn appeared both quaint and imposing, its Victorian architecture shrouded in mist. Alex, a seasoned journalist seeking inspiration for his next novel, had chosen the Weatherwood Inn for its reputation, a place steeped in mystery and whispered tales. Locals spoke of strange occurrences, eerie sightings, and most notably, Room 404, the infamous chamber rumored to be haunted. As Alex stepped out of his car, he took in the sight of the imposing building before him. The inn was a relic of another era, its windows dark and its facade weathered by time. A sense of anticipation mingled with apprehension as he approached the front entrance, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet echoing in the stillness of the evening. Inside, the lobby exuded an air of faded grandeur. Antique furniture adorned with velvet cushions stood against walls adorned with sepia-toned photographs of bygone guests. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow that danced upon the polished wooden floor. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes greeted Alex from behind the reception desk. Her name tag read Evelyn. "Welcome to the Weatherwood Inn," Evelyn said warmly. "How can I assist you?" "I'm Alex," he replied, offering a friendly smile. "I'm here to check in. I've heard fascinating things about this place." Evelyn's smile widened. "Ah, a journalist, I presume. We do have quite a history here. Are you planning to stay long?" Alex nodded. "Yes, a few nights at least. I'm looking for some peace and quiet to work on a new project." Evelyn's gaze shifted slightly, a hint of hesitation flickering in her eyes. "Of course, we have just the room for you. It's one of our more unique accommodations." Alex raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. Evelyn leaned in conspiratorially. "Room 404, she whispered. "It's said to have a history of its own. Some guests claim it's haunted." Alex chuckled softly, though a thrill of excitement tingled down his spine. "Haunted, you say? I'll take it." Evelyn's smile faltered for a moment before she composed herself. "Very well, mister. Alex, room 404 it is. I hope you find it inspiring." With that, Evelyn handed him an old-fashioned brass key attached to a worn leather fob. Alex thanked her and made his way down a dimly lit corridor, the floorboards creaking beneath his steps. He couldn't deny the rush of adrenaline that accompanied the prospect of staying in a supposedly haunted room. Room 404 was located at the end of the hallway, its wooden door looming ominously. Alex inserted the key into the lock and turned it with a click. The door swung open, revealing a space that was both inviting and unsettling. The room was furnished with antique pieces, a four-poster bed draped in heavy curtains, a writing desk adorned with quill pens and inkwells, and a large armoire with ornate carvings. Moonlight filtered through lace curtains, casting ethereal patterns on the hardwood floor. Alex set down his bags and took a moment to soak in the atmosphere. Despite its reputation, room 404 felt strangely serene, as if waiting patiently for its secrets to be revealed. As night descended upon the inn, Alex settled into the room, unpacking his laptop and notebooks. He planned to start his novel that evening, drawing inspiration from the eerie ambience that surrounded him. But as the hours passed and the clock ticked closer to midnight, Alex began to sense a shift in the air. Shadows danced along the walls and a chill settled in his bones. He dismissed it as mere nerves, attributing the sensation to the stories he had heard. Just as he was about to retire for the night, a faint sound caught his attention, a soft whisper, barely audible, as if carried on a breeze from another time. Alex froze, his senses on high alert. Was it his imagination, or was there something more to room 404 than met the eye? Suddenly, a book fell from the shelf with a resounding thud, startling Alex from his reverie. He glanced at the fallen book, a dusty tome with a cracked spine, and felt a shiver run down his spine. There was no logical explanation for its sudden movement. Unease settled over Alex like a heavy blanket. He realized then that staying in room 404 would be anything but ordinary. As he climbed into bed and extinguished the bedside lamp, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone, that something unseen lingered in the shadows, watching and waiting. Little did Alex know, his decision to stay in room 404 would uncover a mystery far darker and more sinister than he could have ever imagined. As the days passed at the Weatherwood Inn, Alex found himself increasingly immersed in the enigma of room 404. What had begun as a quest for inspiration had transformed into a chilling exploration of the supernatural. The first night had been restless. Alex tossed and turned in the antique bed, haunted by fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures and whispered voices that seemed to echo from the walls. He woke several times, disoriented and drenched in sweat, unable to shake the feeling of unease that clung to him like a second skin. Each day brought new revelations, or rather confirmations, of the room's eerie reputation. Objects inexplicably moved from one place to another. A chair that had been pushed aside suddenly appeared at the center of the room. A book left on the bedside table was found on the floor the next morning, its pages fluttering as if touched by an unseen hand. Alex documented these occurrences meticulously in his journal, determined to uncover the truth behind the hotel's haunted room. He spoke with Evelyn, the innkeeper, and subtly questioned other staff members about their experiences. Most were hesitant to discuss room 404, their eyes flickering nervously, as if afraid of inviting its malevolent presence into their midst. One evening, as Alex sat at the writing desk, a cold draft swept through the room, causing the candles to flicker ominously. He glanced up, heart pounding, and saw a fleeting shadow move across the wall, a shapeless silhouette that seemed to materialize and vanish in the blink of an eye. Shaken but resolute, Alex pressed on with his investigation. He delved into the history of the Weatherwood Inn, scouring old newspaper archives and local records for any mention of room 404. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that he stumbled upon a disturbing revelation. Hidden away in a forgotten corner of the archives was an article dated over 50 years ago. The headline sent a chill down Alex's spine. Mysterious disappearance at Weatherwood Inn. The article detailed the baffling case of a guest who had checked into room 404 and vanished without a trace. Similar incidents had occurred sporadically over the decades, each time leaving behind unanswered questions and lingering fear. Alex dug deeper, uncovering eyewitness accounts and police reports that painted a troubling picture. Every guest who had stayed in room 404 had experienced strange phenomena: voices in the darkness, cold spots that defied explanation, and vivid nightmares of violence and despair. One particularly chilling account stood out: a witness statement from a former maid at the inn. She described hearing screams coming from room 404 late one night, followed by an eerie silence that had settled over the entire floor. When she had gone to investigate, the room had been empty, its door left ominously ajar. Haunted by these revelations, Alex began to experience disturbing dreams himself. In his sleep, he saw flashes of a dark figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes burning with malice. He witnessed scenes of a violent struggle, a desperate struggle for survival that seemed to echo through the corridors of time. One night, as Alex lay awake in bed, a voice whispered in his ear, a voice that chilled him to the bone. "Help me," it pleaded, a faint echo that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Driven by a mixture of fear and determination, Alex resolved to confront the dark history of room 404 head-on. He retraced the steps of previous guests, visiting the places where they had last been seen and piecing together fragments of their lives. His investigation led him to the inn's aging caretaker, Old Man Jenkins, who had worked at the Weatherwood for over 3 decades. Jenkins was a taciturn man with weathered features and eyes that held secrets untold. Alex approached him cautiously, hoping to glean information that could shed light on the mysteries of room 404. Jenkins reluctantly agreed to speak with Alex, though his words were guarded and cryptic. "There are things in this world we can't explain," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Room 404 is one of them." Alex pressed for details, but Jenkins remained evasive. "You're treading dangerous ground, son," he warned, his gaze piercing. "Some doors are better left closed." But Alex could not turn back now. He had come too far, delving too deep into the darkness that lurked within the walls of the Weatherwood Inn. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. As the sun set on another day at the inn, Alex returned to room 404, his mind racing with unanswered questions and unspoken fears. He stood before the door, hesitating for a moment, before inserting the key and turning the lock. The room greeted him with its eerie silence, a silence that seemed to hold the weight of centuries-old secrets. Alex stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He felt a chill run down his spine as he surveyed the familiar surroundings, the antique furnishings, the lace curtains billowing gently in the night breeze. And then, as if in response to his presence, a low, ominous sound filled the air, the sound of whispers, faint and indistinct, like the murmur of voices from another realm. Alex strained to listen, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of his eye, a fleeting glimpse of something dark and insubstantial. He whirled around, pulse racing, but the room was empty save for himself. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex began to search the room methodically. He checked beneath the bed, behind the curtains, and inside the armoire, his hands trembling slightly with anticipation. But each corner yielded nothing more than dust and shadows. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A glint of light reflected off a small, tarnished locket lying on the bedside table. Alex picked it up gingerly, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into its surface. Inside the locket was a faded photograph, a young woman with dark hair and piercing eyes, her expression tinged with sadness. Alex studied the photograph intently, a sense of recognition stirring within him. Where had he seen this woman before? Just then, a noise outside the window caught his attention, a soft scraping sound, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. Alex crossed the room in quick strides, drawing back the curtain to reveal the moonlit garden below. And there, standing among the shadows cast by moonlight, was a figure dressed in old-fashioned attire, its features obscured by darkness. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he stared, unable to look away from the apparition that stood before him. The figure seemed to beckon to him, its form wavering like smoke in the night air. Alex took a step forward, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fascination. Was this the ghostly presence that haunted room 404, or was there something more sinister at play? Before Alex could react, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving behind an eerie silence that hung heavy in the night. He stood rooted to the spot, the locket clutched tightly in his hand, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. As dawn broke over the mountains, Alex returned to his room, his thoughts consumed by the events of the night. He knew now that room 404 held secrets beyond his wildest imagination, secrets that threatened to consume him if he dared to uncover them. But Alex was determined to press on. He had come too far to turn back now. The mystery of room 404 beckoned to him, its whispers echoing through the corridors of his mind. Little did he know, his investigation would lead him to a revelation that would shatter his understanding of reality and plunge him into a darkness from which there might be no escape. Part 3, the final revelation. The truth unfolded like a sinister tapestry woven with deception and dread as Alex delved deeper into the mysteries of room 404. After his unsettling encounter with the apparition in the moonlit garden, Alex's determination to uncover the secrets of the Weatherwood Inn intensified. He spent days meticulously piecing together clues, speaking with staff members in hushed tones and retracing the steps of previous guests who had vanished without a trace. His efforts led him down a labyrinth of hidden passages and whispered secrets, each revelation bringing him closer to the heart of darkness that lurked within room 404. One rainy afternoon, Alex stumbled upon a locked door hidden behind a tapestry in the inn's basement. His journalistic instincts tingled with anticipation as he fumbled with the old-fashioned key he had acquired from Evelyn, the innkeeper. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness, a darkness that seemed to swallow the light as Alex descended into the depths of the inn's forgotten history. At the bottom of the stairs, Alex found himself in a dimly lit chamber, a makeshift morgue adorned with shelves lined with jars of preserved specimens and old medical equipment. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, a stark contrast to the musty elegance of the rooms above. As Alex scanned the room, his eyes fell upon a worn leather journal tucked beneath a stack of yellowed newspapers. With trembling hands, he opened the journal and began to read, a chilling account written in a spidery hand that detailed the sinister activities of the inn's owner, Mr. Johnson. According to the journal, Mr. Johnson had inherited the Weatherwood Inn from his ancestors, who had established a secret society dedicated to occult practices and dark rituals. Room 404 had been designated as a sacrificial chamber, a place where unsuspecting guests were lured to their doom. Mr. Johnson's ancestors had believed that by offering human sacrifices, they could attain immortality and wield untold power. Over the years, countless souls had perished within the walls of room 404, their bodies disposed of with ruthless efficiency to maintain the inn's facade of hospitality. Horror gripped Alex as he read the journal's accounts of ritualistic murders and macabre ceremonies conducted under the cover of night. The shadows seemed to close in around him, echoing with the anguished cries of those who had met their untimely end at the hands of Mr. Johnson and his ancestors. Determined to expose the truth, Alex gathered his evidence, a damning collection of photographs, witness statements, and the journal itself. He knew he had to confront Mr. Johnson before more lives were lost to the darkness that lurked within room 404. That night, Alex waited in the darkness of his room, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. The hours crawled by like an eternity as he listened to the distant creaks and whispers that seemed to permeate the inn's ancient walls. Just as dawn broke over the horizon, a soft knock sounded at Alex's door. He opened it cautiously to find Evelyn standing in the hallway, her expression troubled. "You must leave," she whispered urgently, her eyes darting nervously down the corridor. "Mr. Johnson knows you've been snooping around. He's dangerous." Alex hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with conflicting emotions. He knew he couldn't leave without confronting Mr. Johnson without bringing an end to the atrocities that had stained the inn's history. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Please," she pleaded, "for your own safety." But Alex shook his head resolutely. "I have to do this," he said, his voice firm with determination. "For all those who never had a chance to speak." With those words, Alex stepped past Evelyn and made his way down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the early morning hours. He reached room 404, his heart thundering in his chest as he inserted the key and turned the lock with a resolute click. The room greeted him with its familiar air of quiet malevolence, a place where shadows danced and whispered secrets lingered in every corner. Alex's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of Mr. Johnson's presence. And then, as if conjured from the darkness itself, Mr. Johnson appeared in the doorway, a tall figure cloaked in shadows, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of malice and amusement. "So, you've discovered my little secret, Mr. Johnson said, his voice a low, mocking whisper. "Impressive, I must admit. Alex stood his ground, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You can't hide from the truth forever," he said defiantly. "People deserve to know what you've done." "Mr." Johnson chuckled softly, the sound sending a chill down Alex's spine. "Oh, but they won't," he replied calmly. "No one will ever find out. You see, room 404 has claimed many lives over the years. Yours will simply be another." With a sudden movement, "Mr." Johnson lunged forward, a syringe glinting in his hand. Before Alex could react, the needle pierced his skin, injecting a potent sedative that sent waves of darkness crashing over him. As Alex's vision blurred and consciousness slipped away, he heard Mr. Johnson's voice, one last taunt that echoed in the recesses of his mind. "You were so close, Alex, Mr." Johnson murmured, his voice fading into the void. "But in the end, you were just another disappearance." Story 4. The Mirror's Reflection. Part 1. The Inheritance. Sarah had always admired her grandmother's old Victorian home, a place filled with memories of warmth and laughter from her childhood. When her grandmother passed away, leaving Sarah the house and all its contents, it felt like stepping into a time capsule of cherished moments. Among the many treasures left behind was an antique mirror, a grand piece framed in ornate silver, its surface gleaming with an almost ethereal sheen. The mirror had always fascinated Sarah as a child, its intricate carvings and reflective surface seeming to hold secrets untold. As Sarah carefully unwrapped the mirror from its protective coverings, she couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere around her. It was as if the room itself held its breath, anticipating the unveiling of this ancient artifact. Her grandmother had often spoken of the mirror with a mix of reverence and caution, hinting at its storied past and the strange occurrences that had allegedly surrounded it. Sarah remembered tales of distant relatives who claimed to have seen visions within its depths, glimpses of the past, whispers of the future, and reflections that seemed to mirror more than just physical appearances. Despite the unsettling aura that seemed to emanate from the mirror, Sarah was drawn to its beauty. She decided to hang it in her bedroom, where it would catch the morning light and cast dancing reflections across the walls. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she found herself unable to resist the allure of the mirror. She stood before it, her reflection staring back at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. The room seemed to grow still, the air thick with anticipation. For a moment, nothing happened. Sarah blinked, her reflection unchanged in the mirror's surface, and then, as if on cue, a subtle shift occurred, a faint ripple that distorted her image ever so slightly. Curiosity mingled with apprehension as Sarah leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. She watched, mesmerized, as the familiar contours of her bedroom began to warp and twist, like a scene viewed through rippling water. In the mirror's reflection, Sarah saw herself standing in a world that was both eerily similar and profoundly different. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, shapes flitting through the dimly lit landscape beyond. Familiar objects took on sinister undertones. A chair cast elongated shadows that seemed to reach out towards her. A vase of flowers wilted before her eyes. A chill crept up Sarah's spine as she realized she was witnessing a parallel reality. A dark mirror image of her own world where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. She stepped back, heart pounding, but unable to tear her eyes away from the mirror's surface. As Sarah continued to observe, the scenes within the mirror shifted and changed, each glimpse revealing a new layer of this unsettling alternate reality. Faces appeared in the glass, familiar yet distorted, their expressions twisted with malice or sorrow. Voices whispered in a language she couldn't understand, their words echoing in her mind long after they had faded into silence. Night after night, Sarah found herself drawn back to the mirror, unable to resist the lure of its otherworldly visions. She became consumed by the need to unravel its mysteries, to understand the secrets it held within its depths. But with each passing day, the mirror's hold on Sarah grew stronger. She found herself slipping further into its thrall, her waking hours consumed by thoughts of what lay beyond the looking glass. Friends and family began to notice a change in Sarah. A distant look in her eyes, a restlessness that seemed to simmer beneath the surface. They tried to warn her, to urge her to let go of the mirror and return to the world outside its gilded frame. But Sarah was determined to uncover the truth. She delved into research, scouring old books and obscure texts for any mention of mirrors as portals to other dimensions. She discovered tales of ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge, stories that spoke of mirrors as windows to realms where reality itself was twisted and mutable. One evening, as Sarah pored over a particularly cryptic manuscript, she stumbled upon a passage that sent a chill down her spine. It spoke of mirrors crafted by sorcerers and seers, a reflection of worlds beyond mortal comprehension, where malevolent entities lurked in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to breach the fragile barrier between dimensions. Fear mingled with fascination as Sarah realized the truth. The mirror in her possession was no ordinary artifact. It was a gateway, a portal that bridged the gap between her world and the realm of nightmares that lay beyond. Haunted by this revelation, Sarah resolved to confront the mirror once and for all. She stood before it, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out to touch its cool surface. The mirror seemed to pulse with a strange energy, responding to her presence with a faint hum that reverberated through the room. As Sarah stared into the mirror, her reflection stared back at her with an intensity that bordered on malevolence. She saw herself standing in a world devoid of color, where shadows clung to every surface like a second skin. Faces pressed against the glass, distorted, contorted visages that bore a twisted semblance to her own. And then, in a moment of clarity, Sarah understood. The mirror was not just showing reflections, it was drawing her deeper into its web, feeding on her curiosity and fear until she became a willing conduit for the malevolent forces that sought to break free. With a sudden surge of determination, Sarah gripped the mirror's frame with both hands. She closed her eyes and spoke words of ancient power, words she had unearthed in her research, whispered by long-forgotten sages who had dared to glimpse the abyss beyond. The mirror trembled beneath her touch, its surface shimmering like quicksilver. Sarah felt a surge of energy rush through her, a current of raw power that threatened to overwhelm her senses. She gritted her teeth, her mind focused on a single goal: to sever the connection, to seal the portal before it was too late. But as Sarah channeled her will into the mirror, something went terribly wrong. The glass cracked with a deafening sound, sending shards flying through the air like crystalline daggers. Colors bled together in a kaleidoscope of chaos, reality twisting and warping as the barrier between dimensions shattered. Sarah screamed as darkness enveloped her, a maelstrom of malevolent energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. She fought against the tide, struggling to maintain her grip on sanity as the world around her dissolved into madness. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. Sarah opened her eyes to find herself standing in a room that bore no resemblance to her own. Shadows danced across the walls, casting grotesque shapes that seemed to leer at her from every corner. With a sinking feeling in her heart, Sarah realized the truth. She had succeeded in destroying the mirror, but at a terrible cost. In her attempt to seal the portal, she had inadvertently unleashed chaos into her reality, allowing malevolent entities to roam freely where once they had been bound. As Sarah stood amidst the ruins of her shattered world, she knew there was no turning back. The mirror's reflection had forever altered her life, leaving her to face the consequences of meddling with forces beyond mortal comprehension. And as she gazed into the fractured remains of the mirror, Sarah saw her own reflection staring back at her, a reflection that now bore the weight of untold horrors and the burden of a truth she could never escape. Part 2. Echoes of Darkness. Sarah stood amidst the shattered remnants of the antique mirror, her mind reeling from the cataclysmic events that had unfolded. The room around her was a shadowy labyrinth, its walls pulsing with a sinister energy that seemed to seep from the very fabric of reality itself. As she surveyed the wreckage, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to the moments leading up to the mirror's destruction. She had been driven by a desperate need to sever the connection, to close the portal that had unwittingly allowed malevolent entities to cross into her world. But now, as she gazed into the fractured remains of the mirror, Sarah realized that her actions had only unleashed chaos upon her reality. The air crackled with a palpable tension, a sense of impending doom that hung heavy in the air. With trembling hands, Sarah knelt beside the shattered mirror, tracing her fingers along the jagged edges of glass. The surface shimmered with an eerie light, reflecting twisted images that danced like phantoms in the dimly lit room. She had hoped that destroying the mirror would bring an end to the nightmares that had plagued her, the visions of a dark, twisted reality that lurked just beyond the mirror's reflective surface. But now, she feared that she had only opened the floodgates to something far more malevolent. As Sarah contemplated her next move, a sense of unease settled over her like a heavy cloak. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening around her like tendrils of smoke. She could sense a presence, a malevolent force that watched her from the darkness, its gaze burning into her soul. With a sudden jolt of fear, Sarah realized that she was not alone. The entity she had glimpsed within the mirror, the distorted reflections of familiar faces twisted into grotesque masks of malice, were now free to roam her world. They hungered for her fear, feeding on the chaos and confusion that gripped her mind. But amidst the terror that threatened to overwhelm her, Sarah found a flicker of determination. She could not allow herself to be consumed by fear, not when the fate of her world hung in the balance. Drawing upon reserves of strength she never knew she possessed, Sarah forced herself to stand. She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the rising tide of despair. There was no turning back now. She had to confront the consequences of her actions, no matter how dire they may be. With a sense of grim resolve, Sarah began to explore the shattered remains of the mirror's chamber. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, shapes shifting and twisting in the darkness. Every corner seemed to hold a whispered secret, a reminder of the darkness that had been unleashed upon her world. As she ventured deeper into the labyrinthine depths of the room, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden alcove concealed behind a tapestry. The air within was thick with the scent of ancient dust and decay, a testament to the chamber's long-forgotten secrets. In the center of the alcove stood a pedestal upon which rested a small, ornate box crafted from darkened wood. Sarah approached cautiously, her heart racing with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The box seemed to pulse with a faint, ominous energy, an energy that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering inches above the lid, before summoning the courage to lift it. Inside, nestled amidst folds of velvet, lay a collection of old manuscripts and weathered scrolls. Sarah's pulse quickened as she recognized the familiar script, the same script she had encountered in her research, whispered words of power and forbidden knowledge. With trembling hands, Sarah began to sift through the ancient texts, her eyes scanning each page with a mixture of awe and dread. The manuscript spoke of mirrors as portals, gateways to realms beyond mortal comprehension, where reality itself was malleable and mutable. But as Sarah delved deeper into the texts, she uncovered a darker truth. The mirrors were not just portals. They were conduits for malevolent entities, beings that thrived on chaos and despair. The rituals described in the manuscripts spoke of sacrifices and offerings, of blood spilled in the name of ancient gods long forgotten. Fear gripped Sarah's heart as she realized the magnitude of her actions. By destroying the mirror, she had unwittingly disrupted the delicate balance between worlds, allowing these malevolent entities to cross into her reality. But amidst the despair that threatened to overwhelm her, Sarah found a glimmer of hope, a faint beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. The manuscripts contained clues, ancient incantations and rituals that could potentially seal the tears in reality, banishing the malevolent entities back to the shadows from whence they came. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah set about deciphering the arcane texts. Hours turned into days as she pored over the ancient knowledge, piecing together fragments of forgotten lore in a desperate bid to undo the damage she had wrought. But as Sarah delved deeper into the rituals, she began to sense a growing resistance, a malevolent force that sought to thwart her every move. Shadows whispered in the darkness, shapes coalescing into monstrous forms that lurked at the edges of her vision. Sarah's dreams were haunted by visions of twisted faces and echoing cries, a chorus of voices that pleaded for release, their words a cacophony of pain and despair. She knew that time was running out, that she must act swiftly if she hoped to save her world from the encroaching darkness. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, Sarah prepared to perform the ritual that would seal the tears in reality. She gathered the necessary components, an ancient talisman infused with the power of forgotten gods, and a vial of her own blood, offered as a sacrifice to appease the malevolent entities. With a final prayer upon her lips, Sarah closed her eyes and spoke the words of power, words that resonated with a primal force, echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. The air crackled with energy, a vortex of swirling light and shadow that threatened to engulf her. But Sarah held fast, her will strong against the onslaught of malevolent energy. With a surge of determination, she raised the talisman high above her head, channeling its ancient power into the heart of the rift. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, a fleeting instant suspended between worlds. And then, with a deafening roar, reality shuddered and shifted, the tears in the fabric of existence mending themselves with a final, resounding crack. As Sarah opened her eyes, she found herself standing in the chamber once more, the room bathed in a soft, ethereal light that seemed to cleanse the lingering shadows. The malevolent entities had been banished, their whispers fading into silence as they were cast back into the darkness from whence they came. Exhausted but victorious, Sarah sank to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had faced the darkness within herself and emerged stronger for it, her world saved from the brink of annihilation by her courage and determination. But as she gazed upon the shattered remnants of the mirror, Sarah knew that the scars of her ordeal would linger. The mirror's reflection had forever changed her, leaving behind a legacy of fear and uncertainty that would haunt her dreams for years to come. And yet, amidst the wreckage, Sarah found a glimmer of hope, a faint light that burned bright amidst the darkness. For she had learned a valuable lesson, that sometimes the greatest battles are fought within the depths of our own hearts, where courage and strength can triumph over even the darkest of shadows. Part 3. Shadows of Redemption. Sarah sat amidst the shattered remnants of the mirror, the room bathed in a soft, ethereal light that seemed to whisper of forgotten secrets. The echoes of her ordeal reverberated in her mind, a tumultuous journey through darkness and despair, culminating in a battle for the very soul of her reality. As she surveyed the chamber, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to the events that had led her to this moment, the discovery of the antique mirror, its unsettling aura drawing her into a labyrinth of twisted reflections and malevolent entities. She had ventured where few dared tread, confronting the darkness that lurked within the mirror's depths. But now, as she gazed upon the shattered glass, Sarah felt a sense of peace, a fleeting moment of clarity amidst the chaos that had engulfed her world. The malevolent entities had been banished, their whispers fading into the silence of the void from whence they came. With a deep breath, Sarah rose to her feet, her movements slow and deliberate. She approached the remnants of the mirror, kneeling beside them with a reverence born of both fear and awe. The mirror had been a catalyst, a portal through which malevolent forces had crossed into her reality, leaving behind a trail of darkness and despair. But amidst the wreckage, Sarah found a glimmer of hope, a faint light that burned bright amidst the shadows. She had faced the darkness within herself and emerged stronger for it, her resolve tempered by the crucible of adversity. As Sarah sifted through the shattered glass, her fingers brushed against a shard that shimmered with an otherworldly light. It was a fragment of the mirror's surface, an echo of the power that had once dwelled within its depths. With trembling hands, Sarah lifted the shard, holding it aloft as if to examine the swirling patterns of light that danced upon its surface. The shard pulsed with a faint energy, an energy that seemed to resonate with the echoes of forgotten realms. In that moment, Sarah felt a connection, a fleeting glimpse into the mysteries that had eluded her grasp. The mirror had been more than just a conduit for malevolent entities. It had been a window into a world beyond mortal comprehension, where reality itself was a tapestry of infinite possibilities. But as Sarah pondered the shard, a sense of unease settled over her like a shroud. The mirror's power was a double-edged sword, a force that could reshape reality itself, but one that carried with it the risk of unleashing untold chaos. With a heavy heart, Sarah made a decision. She could not allow the mirror's fragments to fall into the wrong hands, to be wielded as instruments of darkness and despair. And so, with a determined resolve, she gathered the shattered remnants and sealed them within a wooden chest, binding them with ancient wards and protective runes. As she worked, Sarah's mind drifted back to the manuscripts and ancient texts she had uncovered, the whispered words of power and forbidden knowledge that had guided her through the darkest moments of her journey. The rituals described within those pages had been her salvation, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the encroaching shadows. But now, as she laid the final seal upon the chest, Sarah knew that her journey was far from over. the mirror's reflection had forever changed her, a reminder of the fragility of existence and the depths of human resilience. With a sense of solemn determination, Sarah vowed to keep vigil, to watch and wait for any signs of the mirror's resurgence. She would remain vigilant, guarding against the darkness that threatened to engulf her world once more. And as she stood amidst the ruins of the mirror's chamber, Sarah felt a sense of peace, a quiet resolve that whispered of redemption and renewal. The shadows had been banished, their malevolent whispers silenced by the strength of her will. But amidst the wreckage, amidst the shattered remnants of the mirror's reflection, Sarah found a glimmer of hope, a faint light that burned bright amidst the darkness, for she had faced the abyss and emerged stronger for it, her spirit tempered by the crucible of adversity. As she turned away from the chamber, leaving behind the echoes of her ordeal, Sarah knew that the mirror's reflection would forever haunt her dreams, a reminder of the dangers that lurked within the shadows and the strength that could be found in the face of adversity. And so, with a final glance back at the shattered remnants of the mirror, Sarah stepped into the light, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, her spirit unbroken and her resolve unwavering.